Ladies and gentlemen, my name is. We have heard those words on a regular basis in WWE as of late. Those words are, of course, attributed to one man, and those words form the title of the latest WWE profile DVD and Blu-ray set for that gentleman, Mr. Paul Heyman. Now, I first became aware of Paul Heyman when he was a manager in WCW World Championship Wrestling. There he managed some of the greatest talent in the industry, not just the company. And of course that includes his own group, the Dangerous Alliance. What a group that was. It consisted of the likes of Larry Zbyszko, Beautiful Bobby Eaton, Double A Arn Anderson, Ravishing Rick Rude, and a young up-and-coming wrestler then known simply as Steve Austin. Now, this Blu-ray DVD set is fantastic, and of course, as with all of these profile DVDs, we have a documentary on the first disc profiling this particular gentleman, Mr. Paul Heyman. I have to say, the documentary is 2 hours long, and for one that is not an in-ring performer, it just, in my opinion, shows the impact, the mark, the absolute revolutionization I think that Paul Heyman has had on professional wrestling for the documentary to be 2 hours long. Now, the documentary obviously follows him from the night. It really begins the night after WrestleMania 30, doing an in-ring promo with Brock Lesnar, talking about Brock, of course, conquering the Undertaker's WrestleMania streak. But then it flashes back to Paul Heyman's childhood and starts to tell the story of the man himself. And I have to say, and this is not meant to be a racist or any comment like that, because I know as he says himself, talking about his bar mitzvah money, he is Jewish. But the one thing you have to admire for a young Paul Heyman, and the only word, as I said again, this may sound slightly racist to some, but it's genuinely meant with absolute respect. You admire his chutzpah, what that means is his balls, his cojones, his confidence in doing what he did from a young age. From selling movie posters at the age of 11 to blagging his way into Madison Square Garden at WWE shows as a photographer, to becoming friends with the likes of the Grand Wizard, Classy Freddie Blassie, and Captain Lou Albano, three of the greatest managers in professional wrestling history. And eventually, as you follow the documentary, becoming the photographer at the world famous Studio 54, even at a young age, when he really wasn't supposed to even be in the building, never mind working for them at the age of 19. Then becoming a professional wrestling manager in the AWA, the American Wrestling Association, to becoming a manager, as I said, in WCW, World Championship Wrestling, then going on, of course, as we all know, to being eventually in Philadelphia for ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling, which then, of course, became Extreme Championship Wrestling. And that is really, the documentary, I think, is very well paced. You really get to hear a lot of the story, and one of the things actually about the documentary, especially right at the beginning, it's Paul Heyman sitting down, and pretty much him, majority is him, certainly nearly, I would say, about 20 minutes, it's him sitting at his desk telling his own story. Very few people can actually sit there, and even not just the amount of the years of stories and experiences that they have, very few people can actually sit there and tell their story in their own words just in front of a camera. It's an extremely difficult thing to do, and Paul Heyman does it extremely well. Of course, on this documentary, we have talking heads. And sometimes, in my opinion, you can tell what perhaps the company the or certainly people in the company think of this particular person when you see the talking heads. And I mean the people interviewed that you see snapshots, sound bites of their interviews regarding that particular person. And you can tell about the thoughts of this person because you look at who is the people interviewed, what relationship they have with the person, and exactly how well do they know the person. And in this case, for this documentary, this 2 hour documentary on Paul Heyman, it's people who know Paul extremely well. Joey Styles, Mick Foley, Gabe Sapolsky, Bill Apter, Tommy Dreamer, Raven, Larry Zbyszko. It's really guys that have known Paul Heyman for many years and worked with him extremely closely. So it's not people like, just for instance, Christian, who may not know Paul Heyman very well. It's people who, or Jamie Noble or a Billy Kidman that may have heard of Paul Heyman. But no, it is people interviewed on this who actually worked with Paul Heyman for several years, gotten to know him very well, including, of course, CM Punk. A couple of them, like Larry Zbyszko and CM Punk, it's flashbacks to old interviews, bits, a couple of bits I think are used on previous releases, but they are those people's opinions and thoughts on Paul Heyman. And of course, after ECW, Paul Heyman went to WWE. That is kind of its situation is explained. And then, of course, becomes eventually the manager to Brock Lesnar. Then goes to being a head writer on SmackDown, to Ohio Valley Wrestling, which was one of WWE's developmental territories. And then, of course, the man we know today, the advocate for Brock Lesnar. So it goes in a full circle from the night after WrestleMania 30, go back to his childhood, and it brings right back up to the modern days. It ends just after WrestleMania 30. Like I said, I think it's very well paced. It's very well put out. You get clear explanations of a couple of bits of his childhood, including his mother being a Holocaust survivor. That's for just those who are not sure exactly what Holocaust is. The Holocaust was when the Nazi Party, who were running Germany in the build-up and during World War II, attempted to kill every single Jewish person or person they did not find acceptable. That's what the Holocaust is. She managed to survive that, and he talks a little bit about his father, and you really do get clear explanations of going from A to B to C to D to ECW and onwards. It's really very well explained of how we got to each position, how we moved on, the reasons for moving on at times, and at least certainly some of the influences that he had in those positions. Now, Paul Heyman is a polarizing character. Much as the same as John Cena is, Paul Heyman is genuinely very polarizing. And, Paul Heyman explains a lot of the controversies surrounding himself as well. Some of them are very well known. Some of the lies, the mistruths, and the opinions that he gave, especially during the ECW days when he was struggling, which of course he wasn't able to do, to keep the company going in the end when around 2001. And he explains, talks about some of the things that he said about trying to trying to get through to the next night or through the next 24 hours to either give himself some breathing space, time to sort something out, or the opportunity to sort something out, or just to get through the situation. And there's quite a few controversies when you're talking about Paul Heyman and throughout his days, uh, whether it's lies, mistruths, or opinions that he gives, and you really do, from both himself and the people interviewed, Tommy Dreamers, the Ravens, the Mick Foley's, you hear not just the positive side, because WWE have tended to do that over the years. They present a superstar profile DVD. Triple H is one, well, a couple of them. His last one, I think I can't remember what it was called, King of Kings or one of them. Certainly the last Triple H one. You get to hear mostly, well, pretty much 99% is the positive surrounding a person. In this documentary, you do get to hear a lot about the negatives, the flaws of Paul Heyman, and he openly admits it, openly talks about his flaws and about things that he's done that he's not proud of. It really is a obviously not nobody will unless you were in those situations back in the 1990s. You'll never really know the full truth unless you were involved, and even some who were involved in that situation will never know the full truth of exactly what happened to him in those days. But you do get him, along with the people interviewed, to talk about both the positives and a lot of the negatives surrounding those days in professional wrestling. Also, on this documentary, I would say that one of the bonus things that I think surrounds this documentary is the behind the scenes footage used in it. I know we all know that WWE records everything. I watched it just the other day. I happened because I was waiting on my Blu-ray getting delivered, waiting on it coming because it was a slight pre-order. I was watching the history of WWE, 50 years of the sports entertainment, and there you saw a lot of behind-the-scenes footage. Vince McMahon showing poses to Lex Luger in the ring at WrestleMania 9, in the production, waiting, the organisation of the show. And one of the things that is included in this documentary, which is fantastic, is quite a bit of behind the scenes footage at ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling. I'm talking about the original ECW, the Philadelphia group that ran until March 2001. I am talking about the genuine ECW. Now, it's amazing. Some of the footage, whether it's in obviously it's a couple of meetings, some backstage stuff. Even there's one great bit. I think it may be an extra or a Blu-ray extra, but there's one great bit where Paul Heyman steps in for Little Guido, or Nunzio as he was known in WWE, to do a promo, and it's Paul Heyman showing Little Guido and the FBI, the full-blooded Italians, how he wanted that interview kind of presented. He actually does it with the Big Sally Graziano and Tony Mamaduke, I think it is, some other thin guy that was in the full-blooded. I think it's Tony Mamaduke, certainly. And Paul Heyman delivers the promo. It's a lot of real behind-the-scenes footage that you could see. And it's extraordinary because I know certainly a lot of that footage has never been seen by the public. A lot of it's, of course, locked up in the WWE vaults, but certainly the vast majority of the behind-the-scenes footage that's included from ECW. And, of course, there's lots of bits from WWE as well. They film everything, like I said, and there's quite a few bits of him talking to Natalia, some of the guys hanging out at ringside. That is one of the bonus things of this documentary. It doesn't rely on stock ECW footage. There is some of the highlight footage that is used all the time. Tommy Dreamer giving Just Incredible the neck breaker off the ladders, and several bits that are stock ECW footage. It's, we need footage of ECW. Oh, we'll stick this and stick that and stick that in. Typical the reused bits. But there's a lot of quite really interesting, really good behind the scenes bits of footage used in this documentary. As I said, the documentary is well paced, it's well thought out, it's people that are involved, that were involved or are involved with Paul Heyman, that are interviewed for this documentary, and I would say certainly it is very well worth the money to purchase, and it's a really good, like I said, nobody will ever know the full stories of what went on those days, but I think it's a really good, in-depth look at certainly one of the guys that had, I think, the biggest impact in professional wrestling over these past 20 odd years. Talking about AWA, WCW, of course, mostly ECW, they go into that a lot as well. Uh, Now, for the extras, and I would say at this point, I would recommend buying the Blu-ray because the Blu-ray has over an hour and 15 minutes of extra stories. There are over 30 short minute, 2 minute stories. Uh, talk either uh, extra stories that either Paul Heyman gives or, as I said, people that have been involved in either WWE like Stephanie McMahon or, like I said, the Ravens, the Tommy Dreamers, the Mick Foleys, talk about their experiences, and Todd Gordon as well, who is also a feature in the documentary, giving stories and opinions and facts surrounding the situation throughout the days. There's only actually three, when it comes to the extras, three matches on this DVD. The original Midnight Express versus the new Midnight Express from 1989. That is during the time that Jim Cornette and Paul Heyman had their feud on opposing sides of the Midnight Express. The Hardy Boys versus Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman. And CM Punk versus Curtis Axel and Paul Heyman. The rest of the, according to the Blu-ray cover, it's 8 hours 37 minutes, so you're talking over 6 hours of extras. So you're talking about, I would say, just about 5.5 hours to be generous on the three matches because they only last about 15 minutes each. About 5.5 hours of the very best Paul Heyman promos, interviews, stories, and a couple of teasers for this DVD Blu-ray set itself. Like I said, I would certainly recommend getting the Blu-ray version. As I said a lot of times before on DVD reviews, it's better quality sound and picture, but you also said you get there's about 33, 34 extra stories, and certainly an hour and 15 minutes of extra stories, views, opinions of, from, and about Paul Heyman and all of his career. A lot of the great, fantastic promos included are the likes of the famous ECW Hey Network Throw Me Off the Air. There's the one from Barely Legal, 1997 ECW's first pay-per-view, where he's explaining because of a couple of injuries, there's a slight change to the card. There's also the one from the night after WrestleMania 30, where involved in, I think it's just simply a Blu-ray extra, where he gives that promo, that world famous promo now, saying that he is the one behind the one in 21 and 1. You know, at my age now, 31 years old, I have witnessed many of the stories and much of the history of Paul Heyman in professional wrestling. And certainly that's one of the reasons why I bought this Blu-ray. Witnessing a lot of these stories, living through a lot of this stuff like the Attitude Era, I've been watching wrestling since the mid 1980s, right through today, and hopefully well beyond. It was really good look, in-depth look at Paul Heyman. Like I said, one of the guys truly who made a tremendous impact on the world of professional wrestling. I would have to I don't tend to give ratings, but I would have to say to give this a 5-star rating. It's a tremendous documentary. Over 5 hours of promos, videos, a couple of matches, great interviews. Some of the controversies in Paul Heyman's career is also talked about, such as the now famous SmackDown and Raw calls, uh, the end of the WCW, what happened in WCW, a lot of the stuff that has been really the most controversial aspects of Paul Heyman are discussed throughout this DVD. So I would say it's certainly worth a 5-star rating. I don't really tend to do reviews, but honestly, if you are a professional wrestling fan, if you pride yourself on knowing or you think you know some of the history of wrestling, some of the stuff that has gone on, and you pride your you at least or you think or pride yourself knowing about some of the history and some of the stuff behind the people involved in sports entertainment, this DVD Blu-ray set is for you. I thoroughly, highly recommend. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman.